Let's see. Should we get the trigger warnings out of the way?
At very least, we're going to be talking about transphobia, gender dysphoria, some sexual assault, some suicide.
There will probably be graphic detail, possibly including genitals.
Mm-hmm. Descriptions of surgeries.
Yeah.
Yep.
We got it.
Yep. And, welcome back to False Dichotomies. I'm Cy Castells.
I'm Daria Quinn.
And today we're talking about the album by Against Me called Transgender Dysphoria Blues. So I'm excited in part because this is the first media we've analyzed in this podcast that is explicitly about trans issues.
Yes.
We're not just injecting our trans agenda into mainstream stuff or even off the beaten path stuff. We're talking about stuff that is by and about trans people. Specifically by Laura Jane Grace, the front lady of this was the first Against Me album to come out since she came out as trans and began transitioning. So that's exciting. And
I remember first hearing about Against Me in about 2008 with the song Thrash Unreal being a big deal. And I just kind of just remember it being in the background. I used to hang out at this redneck bar, and there was a lot of redneck kind of rock that they played there, so there's plenty of the Nickelback and the Seether and, Theory of a Dead Man and 3 Days Grace and all the lovely butt rock of the mid-2000s. So it was in the background, and I kind of associated it with that for a while. And then I realized, oh, wait, no, Against Me is a punk band that isn't associated with any of this stuff. And Laura Jane Grace is a full-on anarchist. And my God, this band is great. Why did I not know this in 2008? And I think the big part of it was I only really got into Against Me after Laura Jane transitioned. So I really only know of the band with Laura Jane. And I had gone for a very long time going out of my way to never see the Dead Name or to avoid any pre-transition view of Laura Jane Grace. Just because I had no interest in that part. I mean, the music is fine.
oh yeah.
It's not the music that I had a problem with. I did not want to see a pre-transition Laura Jane Grace because I did not want to see the obvious pain.
Yeah.
And I was listening to Spotify one day when I'm out doing my errands, and there's a song that comes up on random that I swear is Against Me. And it's I check my phone, and it has Laura Jane Grace's dead name.
Oof.
And the song was called Anna's a Stool Pigeon, which is one of my favorite songs by her now. But oh man, that was a daybreaker for me.
Yeah.
Was seeing, and it's
I think that's something that we don't necessarily realize, because a lot of cis people who are trying to figure out the etiquette for dealing with trans people and their dead names, a lot of people assume that it's as long as I don't say it to them personally, it's not a problem, or as long as I don't tell it to anybody who didn't already know, it's not a problem. But the thing is, if you're trans and you know how it feels to have a dead name and feel the dysphoria associated with it, and especially if, like me, your dead name is a major source of dysphoria. Everybody feels dysphoria in different ways. Some people do not have a problem with their dead name, and I do. Just hearing someone else's dead name or seeing it, even when you know it's a an element of their history and it's not something you can go back and erase. Mm-hmm. It reminds you of your own pain. It's secondhand trauma, which is not to be taken lightly.
The thing about it was Transgender Dysphoria Blues really came in my life at first at a part where Daria was only someone that existed in a locked bedroom online. And I just remember hearing this album for the first time. And it starts off, hey, yay, transgender pride, but it kind of sucks, but I'm not completely hating it. And then it gets darker and darker and darker. And at this point in my life, Daria had to exist because Leela Alcorn died.
So for those in the audience who don't know who Leela Alcorn is or was, can you give a summary?
She was a transgender girl who lived in Ohio, and because her family was unable or unwilling to accept her gender identity, she threw herself in front of a Mack truck and left a suicide note online. And in death, her family completely erased everything about Leela. Leela was never honored or buried by her family under her true identity. The suicide note was taken offline and it ended up going viral because other people had copied, pasted, saved it, knowing that this was probably going to happen as soon as the family found out. And in the suicide note, it's a very powerfully written one too. It's amazing how well it was written, especially for her age. But she said in that letter that she hoped that her death would spark a real change.
And for some of us, it did.
Yes.
Like you, I am not familiar very much with the work of Against Me before Laura Jane Grace's transition. And the way that I came to know Against Me and this album in particular is kind of a convoluted story.
All right, well, we have time.
This is a story that I put together in my mind in the past few weeks as I've prepared for recording this episode. And I had to look up a bunch of dates because it deals with a stage of my life where I didn't necessarily record everything in my memory, so I had to reconstruct the past. Okay. That's something that we sometimes do as we uncover not necessarily repressed memories, but memories that we had been intentionally neglecting to record properly in our brains.
This is a symptom of trauma.
Yes.
As your memory kind of sucks. You remember things happening, but you don't necessarily remember the order or what year or what grade or you tend to remember the emotions of the event. You may remember the details of the event itself. You may not even necessarily remember the context around it.
Yes.
And these are all symptoms of trauma and PTSD.
It's also something that happens just if you are trans and you're in denial. Yeah. And many trans people, depending on when in their life they come out and how many times in life they come out, which is another thing, we may go in and out of denial many times throughout our life. And I first heard the song True Trans Soul Rebel in March of 2015. I know this because I encountered it through the podcast Welcome to Night Vale, which, if you're not familiar with Welcome to Night Vale, they are a fictional podcast in the format of a radio news show. And once an episode, the host, Cecil, will introduce the weather portion. And the weather, instead of being a weather report, is a song. So this is the way that the creators of Welcome to Night Vale weave music into this podcast. True Trans Soul Rebel was the weather for the episode that came out March 15th, 2015. And I remember hearing it and I remember enjoying it. But unlike in most other times of my life, I did not immediately latch onto it as a piece of media that mentions trans issues. Throughout my life, I've always been drawn to trans issues. I've always been drawn to, like, any story about trans people and stories about gender bending and science, the science and history of gender itself. Right. But during this time, I did not, like, latch onto that, and I did not follow through, and I did not check out this band because this was during a phase of denial, and it's probably the phase of the deepest denial I have ever been in. And in fact, it's the last time I was in denial before I came out. And the reason I went into that deep denial was that in the fall and early winter of 2013, I was dating this person. If I decide later that I don't want to reveal their identity, I'll bleep it out. But their name was Kai. They were not going by that name at the time, though. They were the first non-binary person that I'd ever met. And they were the first person that I'd ever come out to as non-binary. And at first, that was like just one of many amazing coincidences that I thought at the time made us amazingly compatible. Mm-hmm. However, not all trans people and not all non-binary people are good.
There is a meme that is going out around Facebook right now of a little cartoon where these two little guys are like, hey, we're both gay. And it's like, oh, we should be best friends. And it's like, no, there's more to us than being gay and whatever else. We should probably, chill out on this. And then, of course, the final panel shows that one of the kids is wearing a MAGA shirt. It's like, oh, yeah. That's why we shouldn't be best friends. So it's like, yeah, there is... Just because you encounter someone who is LGBTQ plus, yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are good for you.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't even mean they're good for the LGBT community.
Right. Hi, Caitlyn Jenner. We are talking about you. We will move on.
Yes. Okay. Here's something that happened early on. I'm not going to get into lots of detail because it would last hours, but to set the tone... A week or so into our relationship, I think it might have been on our third date, Kai said to me, I think I love you. And I was like, really? And they were like, I really do. And I was like, I'm flattered. I don't know if I can return those feelings yet, but if I do, I'll let you know. And then I spent the next week or so agonizing over that question. Do I love this person? We just met, but we have a lot of things in common. This is the first non-binary person I knew. I wasn't deeply in the closet. They were deeply in the closet. It felt like this was a chance for me to really be myself for once. Mm-hmm. Then I decided, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to say I love you. And then I said to Kai, I love you. And Kai said... I'm really flattered. I don't know if I can return those feelings yet.
Oh.
And I spent...
In those exact words? The same words that you used?
Almost exactly.
Oh.
I spent the next few months wondering, wait, did I remember that correctly? And I was like, even years later, I asked a friend of mine who I'd been hanging out with a lot during that time. I said to her, do you remember me saying that this person I had just gone on a third date with had said that they loved me? And they were like, and she was like, yeah, I remember that. And you were really surprised, and it was something that was really like you were talking about a lot. And I was and wondering if you loved them back. And I was like, okay, so yeah, that did happen. So why are they now like acting as if that didn't happen? So that's the kind of thing that happened on a regular basis in this relationship where I was being gaslit. And at the time also, it was the last few months that I lived with my parents, and things were not going well with them either. I won't get into that detail either. Right. there was no safe place for me during those few months. And there were also several times while we were dating, they would kiss me really long and really hard. And I would be like, okay, this kiss is done, and would try to talk, but their tongue was in my mouth, so I couldn't talk. So I would try to push them away, and they would not move.
Oh.
And I didn't want to push more forcefully because that would be violent, and I didn't want to hurt them.
Right.
So after that happened a couple times, I asked them, did you notice that I was trying to push you away or that I was trying to talk? And they were like, no. And they had this really hurt face. Like I didn't mean to do anything wrong.
So many red flags.
And there were other things where I was where they would do things to me that I didn't like. And then if I said, hey, I'm not into this right now, they'd act hurt, and suddenly it would all be about their insecurity and their body image issues, and don't I find them attractive, and you don't find me attractive at all, do you? You're just lying to me. And I'm like, no, I'm not and this was someone who claimed to be demisexual.
Okay.
Which, if you don't know the term, a demisexual is someone who does not experience sexual attraction until after they've known them for a while and formed an emotional bond with them.
Right.
And this person was essentially sexually assaulting me within the first month. And I have a very strong sex drive, so I was not accustomed to this reversal of roles.
And if you're listening and any of this sounds familiar, get the fuck out of that relationship today, because it is not healthy.
Research your local rape crisis center, and if there isn't one of those, I will try to find a resource that I can put links to in the description. So this all came to a head the day I moved out of my parents' house, and they had come along ostensibly to help, but had not taken their asthma medication and had an asthma attack and could not help. And I was like, okay, I understand. But it meant that by the end of the day, I was physically and mentally exhausted, and they were not. So, and as soon as everybody else who helped had gone home, and it was just the two of us in my brand new apartment, they took off all of their clothes while I had my back turned, and basically initiated stuff that I had already said no to. And I didn't really say anything at the time because I was, like I said, exhausted, and also I was my brain was not processing this properly. And because they did not drive at the time, I drove them home, and then I ignored all of their texts and phone calls the next day, and then the day after that, I broke up with them over the phone because I did not want to drive across town just to have this conversation.
It doesn't sound like the kind of conversation you want to have in person because it would not be safe for you.
Yes, it is impolite to break up over the phone, but your safety is more important than manners.
Yes.
Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
Yes, and if you are in a situation where you feel unsafe, do everything in your power to maintain your safety. And if that means breaking up with someone over the phone or over text or email, do it. A conversation we were having about last week, Sai had posted a column on Medium.
Yes.
Okay. And they had brought up an analogy about, if you're backed into a corner and, you're fighting for your life, you're probably going to go for the low blow. And my response to that is that fighting fair is for people who can afford to lose.
Yep. And that's not the end of the story, actually.
Oh no, there's
because
more.
someone like that does not take rejection well.
Oh no.
And they apparently talked to my best friend at the time about me and said that I probably was cheating, and said that I was lying about the sexual assault and that they never did that. Basically all the things you see celebrities doing when they're accused of sexual assault.
Yeah.
And that's also not the last time I had contact with this person, but that's another story for another day. Aren't you excited for that?
Oh boy.
So I spent the next several months from December of 2013 to May of 2014 relishing my isolation. I lived in this tiny efficiency apartment, and basically my life was devoted to work and sleep and training for a marathon. And I spent a long, long time just running through knee-high snow, listening to hard music, and crying. And that was very therapeutic. But it meant that I wasn't really thinking much about anything other than myself. And then right after I ran that marathon, which I did finish, it took me a little more than 5.5 hours, which is long, but I actually finished it, which is more than you've done, imaginary listener.
Unless you have run a marathon, then...
And right after that, I started dating the person I eventually ended up getting married to. Not only was this a straight man, but this was the last person I dated before Kai.
So you
basically
ended up back with the guy?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure I'm getting the
Yes.
timeline right.
Basically jumping back in a relationship with my ex, and I kind of, in retrospect, pushed us toward marriage a little bit fast because I was tired of heartbreak. I was so tired of getting into these relationships and then having them not go well. I wanted commitment. I wanted long-term love. And I thought, if this person's willing to marry me, then I will marry them, and hopefully that will end all of this. It turns out, no. I was divorced before my 1-year anniversary. But it meant that until my divorce, I was still very invested in being female. And also remembering that the first person I'd ever come out to had been an abuser and had sexually assaulted me more than once. I was not prepared emotionally, psychologically, mentally to contemplate transitioning or coming out when I first heard the That Against Me song, True Trans Soul Rebel. So I knew it was a catchy tune. I enjoyed listening to it, and I left it at that. Got married in October 2015 and got divorced in 2016. And then at the end of 2016, I came out, began transitioning in 2017, and also started dating a trans punk rocker.
Yay.
Who is my current girlfriend, who I love very much. She reintroduced me to Against Me. And that's when I was ready.
Right.
And holy shit! Oh, wow. I'm not glad that I spent so much time in denial, but I am so glad that I eventually got to a place where I could really receive this music and process it. Because it's so good. And yeah, it has loads of feelings, both good and bad. And I'd love to get into some of those with you today.
Oh, yeah. So, I guess we start off with the first track, the eponymous track, Transgender Dysphoria Blues. It's sort of this upbeat song. Well, basically, it's introducing you to this person. From what I am to understand, this is both a very personal confessional album, but it's also written in a sense about a fictional character going through all of this. So it's sort of a concept album.
Yeah, I would say it's a concept album about the early stages of coming to terms with trans identity, coming out, and beginning to transition. It's
Or at least that's where we start.
yes. It has to do with a lot of the anxieties and a lot of the joys of that stage of transition.
You know, your tells are so obvious. Shoulders too broad for a girl, but it keeps you reminded, helps you to remember where you come from, and that's a complicated one for me.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if I want to remember where I came from, but I understand that there's a lot of people that do.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, I guess I experience being trans in a very negative way. To me, being trans is like having your life stolen from you before you were allowed to have it.
And there's parts of this album that refer to that pain as well.
And this is part of why it's hard for me to be around other trans women usually, is because I don't have that sense of trans pride. I have that sense of, fuck you, give me my life back. And I think this ties into the fact where I'm like, when I first started coming out, I was claiming a non-binary title before, like, no, full-on trans woman, and now I'm kind of wading back into to non-binary territory.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
People's self-concept can evolve over time.
And the thing about it is the last thing I want is to be reminded of the fact that I'm not considered real. For the same reason I want to avoid they them pronouns, and they're perfectly valid for people, but I have spent so much of my life being dehumanized and othered that I want a pronoun that humanizes me. And I'm not saying they doesn't, but there is a grammatical argument that is made, and the last thing I want to do right now is be caught up in that idiotic argument, because it really is stupid. But it's like, I don't want to be referred to as it, and I don't want to be these zir, them.
Yeah, neopronouns.
The neopronouns, they don't really work for me because they're not normalized enough for me to feel like they humanize me, whereas she, her does.
And that's completely valid as well. I mean, we can never really say for sure what makes a pronoun feel right. I know that they, them feels very right to me. What I usually say is that I go by they, them, or he, him. And if I am pressed to explain more, they, them feels more accurate to me. But he, him also feels comfortable to me. And I know that it's more comfortable for a lot of other people.
Right.
Especially now that I pass as male.
Yes.
So I'm very fortunate in that respect. But just because I have this flexibility where I can take these two different pronouns depending on what you, the speaker, are more comfortable with, that doesn't mean that anybody else is obligated to be as flexible as that.
And I think part of why it's more comfortable for me to be around trans men and trans masculine people is that passing is more likely. Because testosterone changes more of the physical appearance. And how do I put this? You can't undo testosterone that's already been there with estrogen. You can only just kind of hope to cancel it out.
Yeah.
Whereas if you add testosterone to estrogen, it will radically change everything about your body. And as someone who... I've never understood why women would want to get breast augmentations or face jobs or anything like that. It's like, other than, a confidence thing. And even then, I'm kind of like, it's a lot to go through for a cosmetic change. So I also apply that to myself. And it's like, I don't want to go through all these medical procedures and not come out on the other side with what I want.
Yeah. There's several references to that kind of anxiety in this album, where their references are made to stuff like breast augmentation and facial surgery that never quite do what you really want them to do.
Right.
However, you mentioned that like testosterone can make huge changes, but, and that's true, and I definitely don't want to minimize that difference between trans feminine and trans masculine people. But I know a lot of trans masculine people and trans men, and there are things that we cannot change. One of them is bone structure. If you're short at the age of 18, you will be short for the rest of your life.
Right.
And the same goes for like head size, hand size, foot size. And there's a lot of trans men who are very self-conscious about those parts of their body.
Right.
I'm a little bit self-conscious about the fact that I don't have a brow ridge, which is ironic because a lot of trans women are very dysphoric about having a brow ridge. And that's actually one of the things that facial feminization surgery can change. Another thing is testosterone cannot remove breasts that have already grown.
Yeah.
And
that has to be done surgically.
Yes. And I have had a double mastectomy to masculinize my chest, as they call it. Some people call it the teat-yeet.
Okay.
Other people call it getting something off my chest.
Something I don't think that people outside of the trans community understand is the trans sense of humor. There is a stereotypical shared experience. So there's in-jokes amongst trans people that, you know, we may only like cursorily know each other, but we know, you know, the different doses of different stuff. But just I can't say these names right now. You know, the getting something off of your chest or whatever else. It's like if we couldn't laugh at our trauma, we would go mad. And of course some of us do anyway, so
yeah, but at least we can do is have some fun along the way.
It's like you want them to notice the ragged ends of your summer dress. You want them to see you like they see every other girl, but they just see a faggot. And they hold their breath not to catch the sick. And I remember being a kid and cooties. And I was kind of a weird kid. Well, obviously I was a weird kid.
Obviously.
But
you're a weird grown-up now.
I'm a very weird grown-up now.
Weird kid at heart.
But the thing was, I was weird even for weird kids. I always felt more comfortable playing with girls, being around girls, whatever else. In fourth grade, there was sort of a playground war for different parts of the playground. I, within that first week, betrayed the boys, joined the girls, and helped them get the jungle gym.
Double agent.
And it's one of those memories where it's like, God damn, I should have known early on. And then, of course, I remember that time when I was 14 with my counselor and my mom, and I told them, I feel like a girl. And they told me, all boys think that.
It's not your fault you didn't know.
I know, but it's
you were coerced into ignoring it.
Oh, and that's... Well, we'll get into more of that when we get to drinking with the jocks.
Oh, yes.
Rough Surf on the Coast, I wish I could spend the whole day alone with you, maybe a reference to a previous song on a different album called The Ocean. The Ocean is where Laura Jane Grace, back when she was not going by that name, wrote a song that said, and if I could have chosen, I would have been born a woman. My mother once told me she would have named me Laura.
Oh, wow.
I'd grow up to be strong and beautiful like her.
Aw.
One day, I'd find an honest man to make my husband. We would have 2 children, build our home on the Gulf of Mexico. Our family would spend hot summer days on the beach together. The sun would kiss our skin as we played in the sand and water, and we would know we loved each other without having to say it.
Oh, wow. I'm going to have to listen to that song later.
That is on...
I'll find it.
It's the same one that has Born on the Waves of FM and Thrash Unreal.
I'm sure my girlfriend has it somewhere.
It's their popular album.
Ah, okay.
And I have only taken a glance at Laura Jane's memoir called Tranny.
Yeah, Jeanette was reading that when we met.
Okay, so I mean, I've only taken like a cursory glance at this, but I mean, you know, her coming out was not something taken lightly, and taken, you know, this was a very long, very arduous journey, and there were what I would call cracks in the armor at various points, and the ocean is definitely one of those. And when I say cracks in the armor, I mean, I'm going to go into 2001. I had what I feel like was an identity leak, where I had dated this woman who was maybe the cruelest person I've ever known, and sexual assault was a thing. Long story short, something that began as consensual did not end that way, and she did not stop.
Consent can be revoked.
And so without going into details, this was the sort of thing where it's like you have to stop immediately when someone says no, because then there's damage. And because of this, she decided I was gay. That's not necessarily inaccurate, but you know, I was a trans feminine who was gay for women. And just because I may enjoy other kinds of sex, but yeah, it's not a positive thing. Meanwhile, I'm in this really repressive church. I am trying desperately to hold on to faith. And I see a goth girl walking on the street one day, and I'm being weird, so I follow her for like 4 blocks. Oh. Which, guys, don't do that. Don't be me. That was a bad thing. But
we do weird things sometimes when we're dealing with these feelings and we don't have any available outlet for them.
Well, and this is another thing we'll touch on when we get to Drinking with the Jacks. But I just realized that I wasn't living my life the way I wanted to live it. And so I attempted goth, but I feminized with it. In fact, that Halloween, actually, it was the end of September. And my friends and I went up to Geauga Lake. Geauga Lake used to exist. It was
the major water park in this area at the time.
They did a haunted house every year. My friend who had gone off to college, he was bringing all his Akron U friends, and me and my friend Chris were going to meet up with all of them, and we were going to, do the amusement park, and they were going to do the haunted house. And I dressed up because Halloween.
Yeah.
At the end of September.
Often for trans people, the first time we end up expressing our true genders is during Halloween, and that was the case for me as well.
Yes. So I am in this goth regalia, but I have long blue hair. I have, a wig, and I have makeup and fingernails, and I'm insisting that people call me Daria. So this is what I'm talking about when I say cracks in the armor.
Yeah.
So, I learned that researching the album for this podcast. It's like, okay, let me see what else I can learn. And like, oh, I was not even aware of the ocean. And then there's just this public confession several years before Laura would come out as trans that she openly longed to be Laura Jane Grace.
Quite often will express some desire. I think that I never really openly expressed a desire to be a boy in part because number one, I did not want to be a masculine boy.
Mm-hmm.
I was not into sports or video games or any of the conventionally masculine stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And also because I was raised by a feminist, and I was raised to believe that a girl could be anything she wants to be, except a boy. That was not one of the options. But yeah, I did have I think I was like something like 11 or 10 or 12 or thereabouts. I went, for Halloween, I dressed as my brother. I put on his clothes. I stuffed my hair up into a ball cap, and at the time I had 2 earrings and he had 1, so I took out one of my earrings and I went as my brother. And
nice.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
It was my favorite Halloween costume ever, actually, to this day.
Nice. The identity leak as Daria actually caused a bit of a stir. 1, it was considered weird that I expected people to call me Daria. 2, I guess I was hitting on one of the girls that came with my friend Terry's group from Akron U. I didn't think I was being overly flirty. This was someone who took an interest in my costume and the wig and whatever else, and we were talking, and then Terry pulls me aside and says, "You need to back off because my friend here has been trying to hook up with this girl, blah, 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 forever, and you're getting in the way."
What? Why don't we let her make the decision?
Well, see, that's my mental response. But I don't just tell my friend to go fuck off, because this is one of my best friends.
Bros before hoes.
And stupid shit like that. But the thing is that I had a chip on my shoulder the rest of the night because this woman showing an interest in me.
Yeah.
Maybe not beyond just a costume. And it's like, if this dude feels so threatened by the goth girl in drag here, what the fuck,
Yeah.
That's 5 years later at Terry's wedding. Terry's the friend that brought all the Akron U people. I was a part of the wedding party. I was one of the ushers. And the guy that Terry was wingmanning for that day was his best man. And they had arranged for the best man and this woman I was talking to that day. They were going to catch the bouquet and get the garter. It was rigged.
I don't know. That seems like a fucked up thing to do.
And the thing is I felt it was wrong then too.
I mean, if someone else was going to catch the bouquet, then why take that away from them?
I was extremely drunk that day. I was very depressed because it had been a year since I had lost contact with that girl that I had been dating online, the one that ended up lying to me about everything. We discussed this a couple episodes ago. Well, it had been about the year anniversary since she disappeared on me. And my best friend is getting married.
Dark times.
There is an open bar. So
I'm surprised you didn't die of alcohol poisoning that night.
Believe me, that was the same sentiment of most people. I was so drunk, I was basically carrying a drink in my hand at all times. Everybody knew I was smashed. When they told me that the thing was rigged, I got up in the front. I got up in the bachelor's line, and I just told them, "You're going down, motherfucker."
Oh.
And then, of course, I thought better of it because I knew I was drunk as fuck. And I'm like, you know what? I do not want to start a fight at my best friend's wedding.
Yeah, especially when you're drunk enough, you would probably have your ass handed to you.
Well, yeah, and it's like, you know what? I'm just going to go down and, there's a bottle of champagne at the table.
Wow.
And just downing the bottle. I don't think that was the most drunk I ever been in my life. I think that was a couple years later, but this was close. And to give you an idea of how drunk I was. Okay, I know Terry. Terry and I are best friends. And one of the things or at least we were at the time. One of the things that we bonded over was pro wrestling. he actually had wrestled independently for a while. They're doing the wedding photos, okay? And there at the time, there's a wrestler named Matt Hardy. And he does a symbol like this, which
okay. So it's like the okay sign, but with the ring finger down instead of the index finger.
I'm throwing this sign up, arm around his neck, as we're doing the wedding photos. I'm dropping gang signs in my best friend's wedding photos. And just give you an idea of how drunk I was that day. I should have died of alcohol. You're right. I should have died of alcohol poisoning that day.
I'm glad you didn't.
I think I am too, but oh man.
So against me.
Yes, against me, and yeah.
So shall we talk about True Trans Soul Rebel?
True Trans Soul Rebel,
which is like such a powerful anthem. It's like so. I have some confessions to make. Mm-hmm. I mentioned that this was the song that I heard long before I came out, when I was still in denial. I wanted to use this as an opportunity to talk a little bit about voices, in particular trans women's voices. One of the things that testosterone changes that cannot be undone is the deepening of the voice.
Yes.
This is why if someone has gone through male puberty and their voice has dropped, there's no way to change that.
Generally have to get some sort of vocal training.
Yes, or put up with it, basically.
I'm lucky in the sense that my voice is relatively high for someone who is assigned male at birth. Mm-hmm.
I think that once my voice is done changing, mine will be deeper than yours. Yeah.
Most of my life, I was called ma'am on the phone. And it used to irk me to death. Like, why, how dare you call me that? And this is 30-some-odd years. Again, we'll get to this when we get to drinking with the jocks.
Yes.
But, yeah.
Dysphoria does weird things to you.
Yes.
This is, again, early in Laura Jane Grace's transition. And she's never going to have the voice that she had before testosterone changed it. Mm-hmm. But at this point, and she's been a professional musician and a vocalist for her entire adult life at this point. Mm-hmm. So she is used to singing as a man. And she's still singing in a very masculine style. Mm-hmm. Part of that is punk rock.
Right.
But part of it is also that this vocalist is used to singing as a man. I didn't catch on when I first heard this song that I was hearing a woman sing. Mm-hmm. I thought this was a cis man singing about trans people.
Right.
Like, at the time, I had very little experience listening to trans women's voices. Mm-hmm. I was familiar with the writings of trans authors, but I was reading it on the page. Mm-hmm. I was not hearing it spoken.
Right.
And it's really weird that when I listen to this music now, I recognize that this is a trans woman's voice. It's not a cis woman's voice, but it sounds like a woman's voice to me because I know that it's sung by a woman. Mm-hmm. And I have internalized Laura Jane's gender as genuine. And this is something that I think also a lot of people who are unfamiliar with the trans community, whether they're cis or trans, they might assume that when we are referring to someone who looks and sounds like a man as a woman, that we're, in a sense, denying a reality that we know, or like consciously ignoring the evidence of our eyes or our ears. But really, the only thing that causes us to see or hear a person as male or female is the associations with masculinity and femininity. And I've noticed this with other trans women's voices that I've heard as well. There are videos that I watched of trans women early on when I wasn't out as trans and I wasn't involved in the trans community, and I thought they sounded like men. But now when I go back and listen to the same videos again, I think they sound like women.
Right.
And that's because I've spent so much time with trans people that I have formed new pathways in my brain.
Right.
And I hear them as women because I know they're women, not because they sound like they're cis. I wanted to make that point. And also because, like, the same can be true of trans men who haven't been on testosterone, who still, their voices are still high. You don't have to see them as female just because they have these traits. Right. You don't have to see trans women as male because they have traits that you associate with masculinity. It can be changed.
All dressed up and nowhere to go, walking the streets all alone, another night to wish you could forget, making yourself up as you go along. Making yourself up as you go along.
Yep. That's a trans feeling.
That is definitely a trans feeling. I try to explain to my cis friends what my experience is like. And one of the things I make sure to tell them is I have a very fragile sense of self. I had to build myself up from the ground up. I had to give myself my own name, and I kind of just have to make up Daria as I go along. I don't know if they quite understand how that works, but I do get the impression that they do understand the lack of identity that comes with not being allowed to live as your authentic self. There's this saying, you should never give yourself a nickname.
Yeah, that's something that held me back for a long time, actually.
And I, for a long time, was not committed to the name Daria Quinn. Because when I first conceived it, I came up with what I consider a very obvious pen name, Daria Quinn. Which I get from the series Daria. There's the main character Daria and her sister Quinn.
And that is a spin-off of Beavis and Butthead.
Yes.
Where the supporting character Daria, who is the best character in Beavis and Butthead.
By far.
In part because Beavis and Butthead themselves are not meant to be good characters.
No, wait. Shut up. So, like, yes, you were saying.
I was not familiar with the spin-off series Daria. I was familiar, but I knew that the first name Daria had come from Daria. I did not know where Quinn came from until
everybody assumes it comes from Harley Quinn.
I mean, yeah, I could see that. I mean, there is a Harley Quinn on your wall.
Yes, yes.
And there's a couple on your shelf.
Yes. It does not come from a love of Harley Quinn. A love of Harley Quinn comes from the fact that I'm probably slightly crazy.
Slightly?
Well, I'm not bashing you over the head with a baseball bat or anything. And God knows I would have gone with Poison Ivy over Joker any day. Anyway, we are diverging from point.
Yeah, we do that a lot. Yeah, making yourself up as you go along, like, it's part of being an adolescent. No matter when you transitioning is a second adolescence.
Ugh. The first one wasn't hard enough.
Yeah, and this is true whether you're using hormones or not. Certainly there's a whole lot more of the physiological elements of adolescence if you're going through hormones. Ask me about my sex drive sometime. I told you I had a high sex drive before. Woof.
I believe that is a future episode.
Yes. So, but even if you're not on hormones, the elements of adolescence that are your changing role in society and in your family and in your social groups, your changing sense of self, your perception of yourself and the world around you. These are all things that naturally happen during adolescence because you're going from a child to an adult. And the same happens when you're going from one gender to another. You have to change everything about the way you think, the way you feel, the way you act, not in the interest of passing, but just because gender is a pervasive aspect of identity. And you and I are both in the middle of that process. I'm still figuring out who I am as Psy.
And this is a process that takes a very long time and probably doesn't really end.
Yeah.
But then again, that's not really any different from being cis and figuring out an identity. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, we have a lot more in common. We're just taking a little bit of a bump the road.
Yeah, especially now that like the world is so much more complex and gender roles are so much more complex. We were talking last week when we were talking about the comic Bruno that adolescence is stretching longer and longer into what used to be considered adulthood. Part of that is because the world is so much more complex. There are so many more available roles in society, and choosing between them is so much more of a complex process. And in the same way, there are so many more ways to be a woman or to be a man, or there are millions of ways to be non-binary. I'm not trying to minimize the complexity of identity formation for cis people, but times 100.
Yeah.
That's the process for trans people.
Yeah, at least.
And also like the consequences of exploration, like the fact that you, Daria, do not dress in overtly feminine clothing. That's something that a cis woman can do without having her identity questioned at all. I know, because I did that when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And nobody caught on that I wasn't a woman then.
And the thing is, it's not that I don't have more feminine clothing, it's that it just never felt right. It's like it felt like a costume.
Yeah.
It's part of why I am uncomfortable around drag queens is because this is not a costume for me. I don't put on a costume to say, oh, I'm this character or whatever. And part of that is also because cis people tend to conflate drag queens with trans women. And while there are drag queens that find themselves in drag to become trans women, that's not the norm.
Yeah. I have more thoughts on this subject when we get to paralytic states and fuck my life 666.
Oh yeah. Yet to be born, you're already dead. You sleep with a gun beside you in bed. You follow it through to the obvious end. Slit your veins wide open. You bleed it out.
Yeah, we mentioned references to suicide, and there's several in this album.
Yes. Because we didn't cover enough with George Carlin.
Yeah, wow. This won't be the first or last time we talk about this subject. Yet to be born, you're already dead. That's one of my favorite lyrics in that song, because for more than one reason. Number one, the reference to suicide is like a very important recognition of this undeniable fact about being trans, is that it immediately increases your risk of suicide. But that risk can be avoided if you're recognized and able to transition at an early age.
Yes.
That is something that we need to collectively acknowledge as a society.
And this has been scientifically proven.
Yes. You people who were allowed to transition young enough that they did not go through the wrong puberty or enter adulthood as the wrong gender, and if they have social support, if their family supports them, if their schools support them, they have almost the same suicide risk as the general population. So, for Christ's sake, let children transition. Oh my God.
And it's not even like a child transitioning is a major process. It is let them wear the clothes they're comfortable with, call them by the name that they feel is right for them, and when they get to a certain age, okay, we put you on some puberty blockers, and when you let you figure out when you're ready, and you're not going to be able to take on hormone treatment till you're 18 anyway.
There's very little evidence that hormone blockers have any negative side effects whatsoever. They've been in use. Yeah. They've been in use for years. But also, not just because of this reference to suicide, but throughout this album, I see death being used as a primary image and a metaphor. And I think of transition as a form of death. It is the death of your old identity and the birth of your new identity. I believe that line has a double meaning, at least for me. It's both the suicide that takes so many lives before they've had a chance to really live. And it's also a reference to the fact that in order to transition, we have to give up something else. And that can be any number of things. For people who undergo medical transition, sometimes it means losing your fertility. It means losing family sometimes and friends. It means losing your career sometimes, losing your home sometimes, and losing a sense of yourself that may have had some positive aspects to it.
The one that, the stuff that kind of gets to me is, you sleep with a gun beside you in bed. Well, why are you sleeping with a gun beside you in bed if you are not living in fear of being killed?
Yes, that's the other thing.
That is a reality of trans women, especially in the context of the fictional character talked about in this album, a transgender sex worker.
In addition to the much higher suicide rates, there are much higher rates of homicide.
Yes.
For trans people. Especially for trans women. Especially for trans women of color.
Yeah.
And especially for trans sex workers.
And whatever the numbers you ever see reported, multiply them by about 1,000.
Yeah, because a lot of trans women are not reported to records as women. They are reported as men.
Yeah. So sometimes with songs, I find that I get more out of a misheard lyric. And one of the one that really kind of goes for me is, "Does God bless your transsexual heart, true trans soul rebel?" And my mishearing of this is sort of, "Oh, God bless your transsexual heart." And where it's, with the correct lyric, it's more of a, "Does God bless my transsexual heart? Am I worthy of love?"
And theologically, especially with the form of Christianity that is practiced in America these days, there's not a whole lot of space in organized religion for trans people. Certain denominations accept it, and even those, sometimes it's merely tolerance, and we know what they say about tolerance. You could just finger yourself. Yeah, there's a lot of debate over whether God blesses the transsexuals. Depending on your interpretation, the place of transgender people in religion is either abominations, or sad lost souls, or just another member of the flock, or even especially holy individuals whose experience of life gives them special wisdom. I prefer that last interpretation. I believe that there is significant theological and spiritual evidence across many religions and many cultures that people who experience gender in non-standard ways are in a position to view the world in much more complex and profound ways. And they can be catalysts for revelation, basically.
Should have been a mother, should have been a wife, you should have been gone from here years ago. You should be living a different life. And I think we kind of already covered that.
Yeah, it's the what could have been.
I remember last year I was associated with Stark State has an LGBTQ group, a student group, and it allowed for non-students to be a part of the group. And one of the people in the group wanted to bring their mom in to the group to try to explain to his mom what being transgender really means, because his mom is not accepting him as trans. And I was asked to contribute my thoughts. And I straight up refused the first 2 times. Because my thought process, and I'd had conversations with this guy about his mom several times. And it was clear to me that his mom was not coming in to be educated. His mom was coming in basically to attack. And I am not going to get in a useless fight with somebody that doesn't want to listen. So then, 3rd time, I relent. And I write this very long, very caustic explanation of how I experience my transness in a very negative way. And they basically asked me, you don't want to do this, do you? Like, no, I told you that twice already. I don't want to do this. I don't believe that I would bring anything positive to the conversation. Guess what? Lo and behold, the mom never comes. So we wasted our time with this whole thing, but they did the presentation anyway with the group knowing that I refused to contribute. And they were probably, and the people in the group were assuming that I would have had this sort of positive responses. Like, no, you would have known what my responses were because I made them very blatant. It was a lot of direct references to having my life stolen, to my personal feeling that no matter what I do, I will never feel genuine. I will always be chasing an unattainable. And I know that this is not universally the trans experience. And I don't want people listening to this to think this is universally the trans experience. There are a lot of trans people whose lives are absolutely enriched and fulfilled by being openly trans. There are people who are absolutely proud and happy and tickled pink to be trans.
I wouldn't say tickled pink, but I'm proud of it.
Yeah.
And if given the choice, I would not be cis.
Whereas I would. Now, of course, cis woman.
Yes.
So, I need to make that clear because I don't feel that people understand that when I say, I wish I were cis, they think, oh, you wish you didn't have this transgender dysphoria, blah. No, I wish I was a woman. Even if as a woman I would still come to this non-binary blah place, I would have at least been the right gender assigned at birth and had what I would feel are the proper experiences. Because there are things about womanhood that are horrible, absolutely despicable. How
patriarchy.
Well, patriarchy, yeah, basically
living in a culture that excuses and facilitates rape.
Yeah.
And refuses to properly punish rapists. Forced pregnancy.
Stuff like that. And there's elements of that where it's like, yeah, I know it sucks and it would be terrible, and like I'm grateful I don't get periods. I'm grateful that I will never have to worry about pregnancy because I don't necessarily want children, but I'd rather have a choice.
Yeah. It's completely valid to not feel positive about it. Just like there are people who have disabilities who are like, I would not choose to be able-bodied if I had the choice, and people who have disabilities who are like, fuck it, if I could fix my legs, I would take that in a heartbeat. And yeah, everybody experiences their life differently. And I think we need both perspectives. We need the full range of experience.
Yeah. In this situation, I was like, well, I experienced my transness in a very negative way, and I do not want to bring that argument to somebody who is already believing all the negative stereotypes and, the transgender people are horribly mentally ill and whatnot. And the last thing I want to present in that situation is a mentally ill trans woman that hates being trans.
Yeah.
That's not going to help this man's situation with his mother. And this is advanced trans theory. This is not introductory ally indoctrination. And it's part of the reason why I eventually kind of drifted away from the group. Was, they were all in one headspace and I was in a different one, and I did not get involved with this group to be in a student group. I don't really care about your school politics. I am not here because I'm a student. I am here because I need community. And when it became clear that I don't have community here, I stopped going.
Yeah, I feel that as a person who went back to university in my late 20s and now early 30s, as someone who was a member of a campus LGBT group, and to an extent I kind of relish that experience because it has allowed me to take on, in some ways, the role of a mentor. Because, like, I had, like, an opportunity to teach these 18 to 22-year-old kids that, hey, the things you're worried about in your little headspace are not as bad as you maybe think they are, and give them, like, solid relationship advice and practical, like, adulting advice. But at the same time, the fact that for most of the LGBT people I was hanging out with were of that age group, it really wore on me because the experience of coming out at the age of 20 or thereabouts is very different from coming out at the age of 28, 29, 30, 35.
Yeah.
And, like, yeah, it helps to have people your own age or closer to your own age.
Not only that, but it also helps to be around people who are in a similar headspace.
Yep.
You know, you're not going to get a lot of support from somebody who doesn't understand where you're coming from or what your needs are. Speaking of not understanding your needs, unconditional love.
Unconditional love.
So, basically, the chorus of this is, even if your love was unconditional, it still wouldn't be enough to save me.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in there.
There is a lot to unpack in there because there's a lot of ways to take that.
It's saying two things at once on its face. Number one, I don't believe your love is unconditional. And number two, even if that were the case, it wouldn't be enough. So both of those are really weighty things to say. And that goes back, I think, to what we were talking about with the headspace. And a lot of it has to do with age. Younger people tend to be a little bit more naive, a little bit more idealistic, a little bit more hopeful. Older people tend to be a little bit more cynical. And this is a very cynical statement. But I think it's also a very realistic one. As someone who has been through a shit ton, who's been divorced, who's been abused, who's been assaulted, who's been suicidal multiple times, who's been, like, in all kinds of situations that are barely survived, I have a really cynical worldview, but I also have a very hopeful worldview. And I really like media that acknowledges the cynicism. So, number one, like, there's a question of whether any love is unconditional in this world. And I know that as someone who is divorced, like, can we ever know whether someone loves us unconditionally? Because there always seems to be a line that once you cross that line, that person is gone. We know that 50% of marriages end in divorce or thereabouts. Is that evidence that the 50% that don't end in divorce were, quote unquote, real or true? Or does it just mean that they didn't get to that point before one of them died?
One of the things about the rising divorce rate that people don't take into consideration is through the no-fault divorce concept, maybe one of the few things Ronald Reagan ever did right, it allowed people in abusive and destructive relationships to leave their husband without having to find a fault in their partner.
Without having to prove that they were being mistreated. And it's really hard to prove abuse.
Laura, in an interview, has said that this lyric is basically a declaration of, it doesn't matter how strong your support system is, it's not going to mean anything if you don't love yourself. And in that sense, it's a very self-destructive song. I kind of take it into a different direction where it's like, I can have the best support system in the world. I can love myself to death. And it still won't be enough because the experience of being transgender has so many fucked up elements to it that it could still kill you. You could still get killed by a guy, and that guy would go on trial, and his lawyer could pull out the trans panic defense. And if you don't know what the trans panic defense is, it's basically when a person is surprised that you are trans and they panic. So whatever they do in that panic is perfectly justified because you, the trans person, supposedly lied to this person or tricked them or trapped them. That's why trap is a slur.
Yes.
And this is a valid legal defense in a majority of the country, including the state of Ohio.
And even,
where we live.
And even if it wasn't, the person is still dead.
Yeah. And
whether the murderer got justice or not.
Yeah.
The victim is still dead. And you can't save them.
And that's just one example. You know,
there's trans people who are sent to the wrong prison if they get arrested. Or who get arrested because
they're trans.
Yeah, because they're trans. Because they, their ID didn't match their physical appearance, and so they get arrested for a false identification or something like that. Or there's a transphobic cop who's like fuck this tranny and just doesn't treat them like a human being.
Or you might be pink slipped because you didn't answer to your dead name. No, Alliance General, I am not letting this go. I will drag you through the fucking mud.
Or we also have the White House wants to make it perfectly legal to deny medical care to a trans person just for being trans.
We really needed a legal edict for that because that happens already.
Yeah.
Doctors will look at a trans person and shrug and say, I don't know how to treat you because you're trans. And this is called, within the community, it's called trans broken arm syndrome. Where you could go in as a trans person with a broken arm, well, why don't do transition-related care? I don't know how to help you.
Or even if someone is willing to treat you, but they don't have basic knowledge of anatomy and physiology that you'd think would be common sense. For instance, I've heard 2 stories.
Oh, no.
About trans women. One of them was my girlfriend, and I was in the room at the time.
Oh, God.
Who they were in the at the doctor and the intake nurse would ask, when was your last menstrual period? And patient replies, I don't menstruate, I'm trans. And immediately there's confusion. He's like, would you mean you identify as a man? And they just can't compute. It's but if you're a woman, you menstruate. And the one friend of mine who had this happen, she was like, no, I'm trans. I don't have a uterus. I was born male, therefore I do not menstruate. And the nurse was like, no, you can't be trans. You're too pretty.
Oh.
Wow.
And then you wonder why so many trans women in, say, my position, the gender not performing, are basically throwing our hands up in the air and just going to the men's bathrooms anyway and whatever else. Because it's not only would you not accept our gender if we attempted to pass, but we're never going to pass. But now your concept, it's all about passing.
If you don't pass, then you're not really what you are. And if you do pass, then it's then I don't believe you're really trans.
You're too pretty to be trans. Oh.
And that's happened to me in the other direction, where I have introduced myself and mentioned in some offhand way that I'm trans, and they'd be like, so do you identify as a girl then? Because it's they look at me and they see facial hair and they see a masculine build, and they're like, oh, if that person's trans, they must be a trans woman. And I'm like, no, I'm a trans guy. And they're like, but you look so manly. And I'm like, Yeah.
Yeah, testosterone can do that.
Yeah, like we said, it does that. So, yeah, but as long as people think that to be trans is to be fake and to look fake, then anyone who looks authentic, whatever that means, they're going to assume they're not trans.
And a lot of this also has to do with the incredibly disgusting and painful trans porn community.
Yes.
Oh, dear God, you do not want to be looking for free tranny porn. That is just sickening.
Yeah.
So we'll move on.
Yes.
Yeah, notice the whiplash there. I needed to get away from that before I thought about it too much.
Okay. So, next on the list.
Drinking with the jocks.
Yes. This is the most this is a very punk sounding. It's very, sounds very basic. And I think that's intentional. It's about Laura Jane, or the trans female character, trying really, really hard to fit in with the boys. And failing.
Oh. Drinking with the jocks. If I needed to explain to someone what toxic masculinity was in as few sentences as possible, I would play Drinking with the Jocks. Because that is essentially what it is. You are overcompensating for a perceived lack of masculinity.
And a lot of straight cis men, do the same thing, because they feel like masculinity is something that in our culture is always defined by what it's not. It's defined as not pretty, not emotional, not weak. And as long as there's any trace of any of those things in you, you're at risk of falling off of the masculinity train and failing to be a proper man. And if you're trans and you're not come to terms with that yet, then that means that seed inside of you that is threatening to invalidate your whole masculinity, then if you want to really be masculine, you have to go all out with it.
Adolescence was a very complicated time, and I know that that's a no-duh kind of statement, but I have, or at least very much had, a very bad relationship with sex and sexuality. In the sense that when you are assigned male at birth, and you are thrown into patriarchy, and you are thrown into this idea of what a boy should be, from basically the first moment I was ever around other boys, it was wrong. It never felt right. But there was no inkling that there was anything else. I tried to spend as much time around girls as I could, playing with them, getting to know them, whatever else. Because I hated sports, I hated boys, and the thing was, anytime I was around them, it was, who's the best sports guy? Who's, let's beat up the girly boy over here. So that's grade school. You climb into middle school, and there are two things that are happening. One, I had wanted a girlfriend most of my life. I mean, interest in women romantically and sexually was something that happened about as early as 5 years old for me. Now, of course, this was before I had a concept of what sex was, but it was there enough to definitely say there were sexual interests. I never had to question my sexuality because nobody ever put me in a position where I had to question my sexuality. I was always into women. Now, that doesn't necessarily cover all the kinds of sex that I was ever interested in or whatever else, but I had one girlfriend between middle school and 20, and that was in 7th grade. We were so not understanding what relationships are.
Immature relationship.
It was a very immature relationship, but it was also a very innocent. And it ended because I moved away. And I didn't date again until I was 20. And when you are a teenager, assigned male at birth, and you're not dating, you're considered a failure. If you're still a virgin when high school ends, you're considered a failure. So I'm failing at life in a sense. And that drives me to very dangerous places. I think I once said on the show that left to my own devices, I could have been an incel.
Mm-hmm. Same here.
Yeah.
Especially if I'd been assigned male at birth. That's another reason why if I had the choice, I would not have been cis, because I would have been an atrocious dude.
But it's like I was becoming this atrocious dude for two reasons. One, because of the societal expectations that are placed upon boys as young as 6, 7 years old. Mm-hmm. And the other half of it was I still wanted to be accepted by girls. I wanted to be friends with girls. I wanted to be in girl cliques. I wanted to, sit at the girls' tables. I wanted to, I wanted to be accepted as one of them. One of the earliest dreams I ever had for myself was I would be the only boy in the sorority. Like I was accepted in that space. Wow. And so you have these two very conflicting ideas. I am failing as a man, but I am also failing to get what I want.
I think that really hits on something else I wanted to talk about, and that is like a specific experience of gay trans people or bi trans people. That is people who are not straight after transition. Mm-hmm. Now, for a long time, the mainstream trans medical community did not recognize the existence of gay trans people. Mm. One of the qualifying characteristics of being transsexual back in the day, and that is up until like even the 90s, was you had to be attracted to the gender other than the one you were identifying as. As we know, there are a lot of trans people who don't fit that mold. Mm. Present company, both you and I, are more attracted to the gender we identify as. I'm currently dating a woman, but she's the first woman I've ever dated. Mm-hmm. And identify as bi, but most of my attraction throughout my life has been to men. And especially early on in coming to terms both with our sexuality and our gender identity, we sometimes conflate our attraction to the other gender with our desire to be the other gender. To this day, when I think back on all the men I've been attracted to, I still can't always figure out if I was attracted to them or I admired them and wanted to be like them.
See, I have similar issue in the sense that, and I find this is common of trans women, is that they become very obsessed with the female form. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's not just a large consumption of porn, it's a large consumption of erotica, artistic nudes, and so forth. There is, they consume a lot of this sexualized media because there is an obsession with the female form. And for me, the question that I've seemingly gotten from the outside is that, well, Daria, you must like men because you're not into women like a guy is into women. It's not about fucking her. It's about being her. Mm-hmm. And it's possible for me to have both of those. I may be obsessed with the female form because it's something I desire for myself. Mm-hmm. But I can also be attracted to it and drawn to it sexually. And the few times I've tried to come out to medical practitioner, I'm asked, so you think you're gay?
No.
Well,
yeah, but it's not in that way.
It's like, how do I answer this question in a way to make you understand what's really going on here? In the first episode, you said something along the lines of, you could have lived a life as unfeminine as possible, but there was no way you could do so and still be happy as a woman. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I have a similar concept where it's like, I could be the most feminine, flaming, whatever guy in the world, and it wouldn't be right.
Yeah, partly because that's not your natural expression of gender.
Yeah.
And part of the reason that I don't like being a masculine woman is because I'm not especially masculine. I am pretty effeminate.
Right.
I mean, you probably hear it in my voice. I have a very effeminate way of speaking. But also, like, I enjoy having long hair, and I enjoy having it braided. I enjoy wearing skirts on occasion, even after transition. I like painting my nails. I have feminine interests. I enjoy knitting and crocheting. It's like, that's why I'm like, it's not enough just to inhabit all of the stereotypes associated with masculinity, because it's not who I am.
I guess the easiest way for me to identify myself to people who need a quick and easy explanation is I'm basically a butch lesbian, but I don't necessarily like using that term because I feel butch is kind of reductive for me personally to be using, because there is a cis conception that lesbian relationships consist of a masculine and a feminine presence. And that is...
Someone's got to be the guy.
There is a butch and there is a femme. And it's like, well, it's not that simple. Okay. You know, and I may be butch. I may be a top, so to speak. I actually say I'm more of a switch, but I could be that role, still not being masculine, or I could be femme to hell and still look like this. You know, these are reductive terms, and it's like, yeah, I could do so to simply explain it to people within the community, but even then, that's probably not a good idea because there's people who, you know, there is a lot of landmines around using lesbian terminology as a trans woman to identify yourself.
But though, like, there are lesbians who don't recognize trans women as women, and we call them TERFs, and we don't tolerate them.
So I am hyper aware of that. I am an anomaly of an anomaly.
As am I. Wonderful.
Not only am I this trans woman lesbian, but I'm also a trans woman lesbian that has a very difficult time dealing with her own internalized transphobia long enough to be able to be around other trans women. And that is exactly what it is. It is my internalized transphobia. I recognize that. I'm trying to work my way through that, but there is always going to be a level of my gender dysphoria that will be a barrier between me and being able to interact healthily with other trans women. It doesn't mean that it's impossible. It doesn't mean that I can't work through it. It means that there is going to be a barrier that I have to work my way through in order to be close to another trans woman.
I actually, you've mentioned that a couple times so far today, and like, I really feel very similarly. I do have trans masculine friends, but the ones that I am most comfortable being around are non-binary ones. And especially if they're like really flaming gay, but like me. But also, I have never really felt comfortable hanging out with binary trans men who are straight, because like every so often they just say something that it's like it makes me feel invalidated because their idea of masculinity is so different from mine. And they feel most comfortable inhabiting a kind of masculinity that I will never be comfortable with, and that I don't want to be comfortable with. Whereas I do feel very comfortable with trans women, especially trans lesbians. I'm dating one of them. And also, not only that, but trans lesbians have been my main source of information about trans experience from an early age, especially the author Julia Serrano. I read her book, Whipping Girl, back when I was in my early 20s, and that was the first inkling that I got that I might actually be trans, that it's not just something that existed in the corner of my imagination, but something that could be real. But it was really hard for me to come to terms with it because I was reading the experience of a woman, and I was like, I was wanting to have her experiences, but it took me a while to figure out that it does not invalidate my being trans to identify with a trans woman. Because I was like, oh, well, if I'm identifying with a trans woman, then it must mean that I'm a woman because I'm identifying with a woman. But it was the trans part that I was identifying with. And especially the fact that, like, I will probably talk about this again sometime, but I feel in many ways more like a trans woman than a trans man, at least when it comes to the most available images we have of trans women and trans men. So, yeah, it's really complicated, especially for gay trans people like us.
Yeah. So there's also a very literal meaning for me as far as drinking with the jocks is concerned, because one of my coping mechanisms for
As we've talked,
as
we've mentioned,
has been alcohol.
Yeah.
And who was I drinking with all of those times? Extremely hyper masculine men. The other contender for the time I probably was the most drunk in my life was my 25th birthday. And I was going to get together with a bunch of my friends and we were going to go bar hopping. Okay, so I get to my hometown redneck bar at about 7, 8-ish. By 10 o'clock, I have completely blacked out from a combination of beer and shots and whatever else. I start to remember things that have actually happened to me again around midnight-ish, when we are off to the Lamppost, which is a strip club in the area. I am drunkenly calling people and apologizing for not including them in this, or that we were supposed to meet up or wherever else. And like the next day, like, okay, I got this weird message from you and you are apologizing for something, but I don't even know what. And I'm like, I thought we were supposed to get, like, no, we just went home. We told you. And I was completely blacked out.
Oh, wow.
So I'm at this strip club, and it is my 25th birthday. I actually wrote a song about this. I'm at this club. I am drunk as hell. 9 Inch Nails is playing. Every Day is Exactly the Same, which is a very dark song. And sort of a dark malaise. And there is this girl who has various piercings all over, and they all glow in black light. She is a very fit, athletic woman, and I was very suicidal that night. That'll give you an idea of how drunk I was. And I swear I ended up buying 3 different private dances, and I wouldn't leave until I got a private dance with this one. Her name was Roxy. I mean, this is the lowest thing I've ever felt, and I almost didn't feel it all because I was using this person to feel human. And I was surrounded by very masculine friends, and this lie, this fantasy I am paying for is the only thing left connecting me to any sense of humanity.
I think that, like, I've had my own experiences with binge drinking, and maybe not to the same extent as you, but to a much greater extent than I was used to at the time. Because, like, I was a very light drinker for my early and mid-20s, and that suddenly changed. Actually, the first time I drank to a really dangerous extent was at my bachelorette party. So,
Oh, well, that's to be expected.
that is, well, it's to be expected, but also, like, here's the thing. I am an introvert. I did not want to have a big party. I didn't have a big wedding either. There were 7 people at my wedding, including me and my husband. But there were only 3 people at my bachelorette party, including me. I threw this bachelorette party in part as a gift to my friend who is a, still to this day, closeted trans woman. And I was like, I'm going to have a bachelorette party, and you're going to be there, because you're also a bachelorette, even if no one else knows it.
Right.
And, like, one of the few other people who knew about her identity was our mutual friend, so the 3 of us got together. And here's the thing. Neither of them drank at all.
Oh, no.
So I drank, I don't know how much, but more than half of a bottle of tequila. And I did have a good time, but I, at the time, I was not in the habit of drinking, and at the time I had no clue why I was drinking so much, except maybe I didn't want to be doing what I was doing. I was still very much in denial. This was in that time period when I was still doing my best not to think about being trans. And I was also on the verge of failing to deny being trans because I was getting signs from all over the place. Just like the fact that I had so much anxiety and angst and agony associated with trying to find a dress to get married in. Oh my God, that was the most horrific experience of that entire year. Just knowing that if I didn't wear a dress at my own wedding, I would be failing to be a girl. But if I did, I would be wearing a dress at my wedding, which is supposed to be when I'm feeling my most happy and content, and that's supposed to be like an expression of my love and my personality. And I couldn't do what I really wanted to do, which is wear a suit. Or just anything other than a dress. So yeah, that wedding was a shit show, and like after my wedding I cried so hard because I felt like I had failed both to do what society wanted me to do and what I wanted to do. What was the point? And then I got divorced less than a year later. So yeah, denial is a really harsh thing to be going through. You think you're sparing yourself some kind of pain, but you're not. You're just making it worse. And on that cheerful note, folks, this discussion will be continued next week in part 2.